Hello, and welcome to FlaskCon. I'm going to be presenting about the current state of the Pallets organization and projects. My name is David Lord. I'm the lead maintainer of Flask and the other Pallets projects. I'm not the original author. This is my wife and I in Rome. You can find me pretty much everywhere online at Davidism. I'll post these slides and the talk on my website after this. I've been a member of the Python community for 15 years. I'm a PSF fellow. I have a full-time job as a software engineer, then devote plenty of my free time to maintaining Flask and the other libraries and helping out other Python programmers and projects. I also enjoy scuba diving, hiking, brewing beer with my friend in my garage. I'm currently learning Japanese. I just got to Jinja in my kanji, which was fun. I don't really enjoy running, but I already missed Anthony Shaw's 5K run that was up on the open space board. I need to ask him to do another one though. These are our cats, Mochi and Juniper, helping out in my office. They help me with Flask every day. So welcome to FlaskCon. This is a mini one-day conference focused on Flask and the other Pallets projects. We've had a few conferences online in the past, starting in 2020, and this is our first in-person event. You can find past talk recordings of those talks on pyvideo.org. We're waiting for the PR to be merged for some of the latest talks, but it should be up very soon. Today we have 4 technical talks about working with Flask, separated by lunch in the middle. After that, members of the Pallets team will be hanging around for office hours for a couple hours at the end of the day. Please stop by and say hi to tell us about what you do using our libraries, or to ask us questions, or just to discuss the projects or your projects. We're definitely excited to meet more of our community in person. We're also running a sprint starting on Monday, so anybody, regardless of your familiarity with the libraries or with Python, can be a successful contributor and can learn how to do that at the sprints. So I definitely encourage everybody to join us. Here's Mochi and Juniper foiled by this window trying to get that bird up there. So what is Pallets? Pallets is the open source community organization that develops and supports the popular Python frameworks and libraries Flask, Jinja, Click, Quart, Werkzeug, Markup Safe, and It's Dangerous. It was created 8 years ago, right around when I became a maintainer, in order to move ownership from the original author, who was Armin Ronischer, to a group of maintainers and a community organization. These libraries power applications of all sizes around the world. They are some of the most popular Python libraries, downloaded hundreds of millions of times every month. The goal of Pallets is to grow the community around these projects to create a sustainable group of maintainers, contributors, and users. You can join us on our Discord chat, discord.gg/pallets. You can watch the repositories on GitHub to see what issues and PRs are coming up, to get involved more. They're definitely helping me with Flask here, not sleeping in the sunbeam. Who is Pallets? So there are 3 active core maintainers: myself, Phil Jones, Adrian Monick. Phil wasn't able to make it today. He was going to be here. I'm pretty much focused on everything at once. Phil maintains Quart and is applying his async expertise to Werkzeug and Flask as well. Adrian is always around to help on Discord and IRC and helps out with issue triage and evaluating security issues. He used to be a lot more active developing as well, but he's still very heavily involved in the community. Pallets is also its community. So we have an active Discord server where people can ask and answer questions, as well as discuss contributing to the projects. We have 4 great moderators on the team: Kara, Carson, Guillaume, and Radoslav, who help keep everything on track. There are also other people on the team helping organize events like these, coordinating documentation, and supporting us in lots of other ways. Adam, Abdur, and David C. are all helping us organize FlaskCon today. 2 lazy cat loafs. The Pallets organization is part of the Python Software Foundation through their fiscal sponsor program. The PSF provides 501c3 tax-exempt status. They help us manage administrative issues like donations, accounting, budgeting, insurance, and legal support. They've been a huge help for me over the years. It was one of the first things I accidentally stumbled into at my first PyCon, was talking to some PSF folks and making Pallets the first project in their fiscal sponsoring program. We're fairly lucky in the open source world to be a project that receives a steady stream of donations and financial support. It's not enough to hire somebody full time, but it does allow us a lot more opportunities than we might otherwise have. As part of the PSF, we can take individual or recurring donations directly through their website. You can go to palletsprojects.com/donate or point your company there. We're also part of GitHub sponsors, so if you or your company is on GitHub, that's a great way to donate to us. We're partnered with Read the Docs and their Ethical Ads platform. And Read the Docs and Ethical Ads is part of the Python community. They're great people. I think some of them are here at PyCon this year. So we receive some of the monthly ad revenue from all the ads served on our documentation. We're also a part of Tidelift, which is a platform that divides up enterprise subscriptions from companies to many of their dependencies in return for maintainers keeping up with just a few basic tasks. So really, if you're working on if you're maintaining a project and doing like just the basics, you're probably already meeting their checklist, and you might be able to receive funds through them or get funds to the projects you use. Through these, I'm able to be paid a bit for my time each month, as well as attend conferences like these where I can give talks and run sprints and meet other people in the community. I've used some of the funds to hire a designer to refresh and unify the logo design for our projects, which you'll see on the next few slides, and you already saw the Pallets logo earlier. I'm currently working to hire a project manager to help to manage me, to help me organize the next 6 months of my time and responsibilities so I can better get work done for Pallets and to produce documentation about these processes and how we maintain the projects so other people can do it. We want to find other ways to use our funds as well, such as organizing a conference outside of PyCon in the future, hiring developers for specific long-term tasks, or adding bounties to certain types of issues, similar to what the URLib3 team has done. So on July 1st, 2022, I managed to bring Flask's inbox to 0. It was hard. A year later, I did the same for Werkzeug, which is the underlying HTTP and WSGI library for Flask. I've since done it for Markup Safe, It's Dangerous, and Flask SQL Alchemy as well. This is something that I worked on for years. I got every pull request merged, every issue responded to and decided on. And this was pretty much a goal of mine since I became a maintainer. Because when I first became a maintainer, every project had multiple pages of open issues and unreviewed PRs, probably around 1,000 open issues combined between the 6 projects at the time. Or more. I don't have exact numbers. I wish I had kept track of it. But this made it incredibly difficult to make decisions or know where to focus effort, as it was just an overwhelming number of possibilities to keep track of. Was a certain issue actually an issue? Did a feature request make sense? Did an issue that had been talked about for 3 years still need to be solved, or could I say no to it? Did one request depend on one or more others or conflict with other requests? PRs were severely out of date, incomplete, needed refactoring. So day by day, I just picked an issue and tackled it one at a time, and slowly built up a giant graph in my head of all the interrelated parts. I gained a better understanding of all the libraries and a better sense of what I thought should and should not be done and how to do it. With the inbox at a manageable size now, it's not 0 because there's always new stuff coming in, but with it at a manageable size now, it's much easier to evaluate and respond to each new request much more quickly. Depending on how you use Flask and Werkzeug, you may or may not have noticed a few waves of deprecations and removals over the past 2 or so years, in addition to all the bug fixes and features that have come in. I've been applying what I learned about the code base through my work on the inbox to identify inconsistent, outdated, or duplicated code, and to refactor to improve that. As much as possible, we try to remain backwards compatible while issuing deprecation warnings first before removing things in a subsequent release. It's not something we do lightly. We're very aware of how many people are using our libraries, but I think it does represent an improvement to the libraries and a win for maintainability. The latest refactor was to Werkzeug with 2 significant removals. The first is that we no longer accept bytes in most places, only strings. This was a holdover from our transition because we were originally a Python 2 only library, because Python 3 didn't even exist, or had just come out. Then we were a Python 2 and 3 compatible library, which added a lot of complexity to the code. And then later, we dropped support for Python 2 and we were Python 3 only, but we still had all this complexity we had added to work with bytes and strings everywhere. The second is that Werkzeug had a very old, slightly customized copy of Python's built-in URL lib module in Werkzeug itself. We weren't using Python's implementation. At the time, this made sense because, again, we had to support Python 2 and 3, and those were slightly different implementations and stuff. But it was a huge API surface to maintain, and we were kind of duplicating work that the experts on URLlib3 in CPython were already doing. And we discovered when we made these 2 changes, when we removed byte support and when we removed URLlib3, or our URLlib copy, we saw significant speedups to request and response handling. Because both of these changes were to code that was called everywhere during every single request. In the benchmarks at the time, we saw about a 50% speed up to requests and responses. So if you make a Flask or Werkzeug application today, you should see a significant speed up compared to using older versions from years ago. Because of these refactors, the code is both faster and it's a lot easier to maintain. It's just a lot easier to reason about when you look at it, when you don't see all these conversions and weird things going on. The other major focus has been on async support and more code sharing between Flask and its async counterpart, Quart. So Phil Jones wrote Quart to be a drop-in async replacement for Flask. It has the same developer API, and many of Flask's extensions work with Quart directly. We began to talk a few years ago together about how we could bring this accomplishment into Flask itself. The async programming paradigm is popular, for good or bad, for correct uses or uses that don't necessarily need async, but people like to use it. And some people were perceiving Flask as outdated because it didn't support async directly. Today, Quart is an official part of the Pallets projects, so we brought Quart from an independent library that Phil had developed into the community organization. Phil has done amazing work to figure out how to enable some async in Flask. So today you can write async def view functions in Flask and it will work. And he's also identified and unified a lot of the interfaces that both Flask and Quart are using behind the scenes. So we're doing a lot more code sharing between the 2 code bases. Flask still has a ways to go before it is truly async the way Quart is. And there are some very tricky questions to answer before it will be possible. But we are making progress. And our long-term goal is to have a single package that offers both Flask's WSGI and Quart's ASGI interfaces. So in some future, ideally, you just import Flask and you can do sync or async programming. So Markup Safe and It's Dangerous are two smaller libraries we maintain. Both of them are essentially done. They're stable. There's no really bugs or features coming in. Both have been in Box 0 for a few years. Notably, though, Markup Safe, I recently went on a bit of a saga evaluating its C speedup performance and trying to figure out if Python itself had gotten fast enough that we didn't need to build 59 wheels for every release anymore. But we did find that the speedups could be sped up, and so we're still building 59 wheels for them, but they're faster now. We've also got experimental PR re-implementing the speedups in Rust for memory safety potentially, and look for a 3.0 release soon. So the final two core projects are the Jinja templating library and the Click command line framework. Both of these are extremely popular libraries, but unfortunately, with all the other things I've been focused on, I have not been able to focus on either of these for, well, since last PyCon. I currently have about a 90% done rewrite of Click's command line argument parser, replacing our modified copy of optparse for something much more efficient. I have a similar desire to refactor Jinja's parser and compiler to make it easier to maintain and extend. Right now, it's the compiler in Jinja. Jinja is its own language. It's not pure. It gets compiled to Python, but it is its own language. It needs a grammar specification. It could use a big refactor of the parser, the compiler, and the runtime to make it easier to reason about for maintainers, and would make it easier for us to tackle some of the open issues on the issue tracker. But that's a very big task. So if I can find the time for it, or if somebody is really interested in compilers, come find me. Yeah, so these two projects need a lot more attention if we can get it for them. Even people just reviewing PRs and saying, this does look good to go. It looks like everything's here. Or triaging bugs and saying, this is still a bug, or this is where I think it's going wrong in the code base, would be a lot of help. Here's two lazy cats again. So we've made a lot of other changes, both big and small, to the libraries over the past years. A lot of the maintainer stuff I've been doing hasn't necessarily been changes to the actual code of the libraries and making new releases. I'm now using pyproject.toml, the standard way to specify metadata for Python projects. And I'm using Flit Core instead of setup tools as the build backend, which makes our builds a lot faster. Not that they were slow before, but setup tools is a very legacy system compared to Flit. We now pin our dependency environments dependencies with pip compile so that every contributor has the exact same setup that we test with, which makes it a lot easier to work at sprints. A significant amount of work has gone into fully type annotating all of our libraries. So we now export full type information for all of the libraries so that it can, all of them pass with MyPy strict mode. Most of them pass with Pyrite as well, which is what VS Code uses. If anybody is interested in typing, that's another place where we could use a lot of help, because as much work as we put into it, typing is ever changing and difficult to get right, and so we could use some expertise there. All the I've also done a lot of work to fully automate our release process and improve its security. So PyPI is configured to require two-factor authentication. We take advantage of PyPI's new trusted publishing feature, which means that we no longer, maintainers no longer have to create credentials and build or upload things to PyPI manually. It's all done in an automated GitHub workflow. We just push a tag saying, here's the new release. GitHub will build everything, preview it for us, we hit approve, and GitHub talks directly to PyPI and authenticates that way securely. It's a really nice feature. Automating our release workflow has made it way easier to make releases, surprisingly. And this means I can get bug fixes out a lot quicker. It's a lot easier for me to say, okay, we got one change in, let's just make another release. We don't need to wait to see if anything else comes in. As part of that build process, we also generate SLSA provenance. It's pronounced SALSA, apparently. I don't remember what it stands for, but this is a kind of growing industry standard about how to attest that like the build environment and the built files match what's uploaded on PyPI. PyPI itself is growing support to show those attestations so that you can look on PyPI and see that this version of Flask was built directly from the code that's at this commit in GitHub, and you can see the workflow that built it. So maintainers no longer have to do any manual work to do all this stuff, which is a lot more secure. And also as part of our security, we've started using GitHub's private security advisory system to take in and work on security issues and to control the final CVE message that goes out. So hopefully, you may have seen a few CVEs go out about Werkzeug and Jinja recently, and I would hope that the messages in those clearly explain what the actual vulnerability surface is and aren't impenetrable to normal users. Oh, here's somebody playing upside down with a spring. So there's still more work to be done on the core projects, but a lot of what I'm focusing now is on the ecosystem of extensions around Flask. So Flask extensions make it great, but many of them have even fewer resources than we do, or fewer maintainers. Libraries have become less maintained as their authors move on to other things or no longer have time available. This makes them more susceptible to bit rot, to breaking as changes are made to the core libraries, as well as it's encouraging people to make forks, but then kind of causing confusion or uncertainty over what fork we should be using, or all the tutorials still mention the one name while all the maintenance is happening in another. I've had to jump in a few times on extension projects to quickly fix them after a release that finally removed something in Flask or Werkzeug or Jinja ended up breaking this library that hadn't been maintained for 6 or 7 years sometimes. So to address this long term, I've been working on creating this new Pallets eco organization. The goal of this is to enable community maintenance of the extension ecosystem for our libraries, mostly Flask, because that's where most of the extensions are, but Click and Jinja also have plenty. It's an idea similar to the Jazz Band organization. If you've heard of that, that maintains Django extensions in a similar way. Authors can transfer their libraries to the Pallets eco org on GitHub and PyPI. They retain access, but the core maintainers of Pallets do as well. So we can jump in to make a quick release to keep things working if we need to. But we can also help add maintainers from the community of the users of those extensions. We've already had great success with this with Flask SQL Alchemy, Flask Session, and Flask Classiful, both of which were unmaintained for 5 or more years, and then finally got new releases updating them. We've also worked with Blinker, Flask Debug Toolbar. We've had a lot of others transferred as well, such as Flask Mail, which hasn't been maintained for 14 years. So that's something I might be sprinting on at this sprint. I've also been working to standardize and document the Pallets project layout, the tools and configurations that we use, and apply that to the Pallets eco projects as well. So the more that project management is standardized between all the projects in our ecosystem, the easier I hope it will be for contributors to jump to any project in the ecosystem that needs help. If you've learned how to contribute to Flask, it should look exactly the same when you go over to Flask Mail, and you'll use the same contributing process, ideally. So getting involved with a Pallets eco project is a great new way to contribute to Pallets, especially since the issue number for so many of our core projects is pretty low now. All the extensions need a lot of help though. Here's a very proper cat in a chair. So More about me and what I've been working on specifically. I'll stop being humble for a minute, and I don't have exact measure for hours of lines of code, but I guess I'm handling 85 to 90% of maintaining our projects. All the stuff I've talked about here, all the stuff I do to maintain the projects, I had to discover and learn from scratch from when I first started being a maintainer 8 years ago. That's not to downplay everyone else's work on the team, but to emphasize how much of the projects currently depend on only one person. I don't like this situation. The pressure of this much responsibility has brought a lot of stress. I've suffered severe burnout multiple times each of the past 4 years. But on a happier note, I recently got married. We're planning to have a child soon, which means my available free time is only likely to go down in the future. So my goal by the end of this year is to make it possible to change this situation. I've been writing a new website for Pallets with up-to-date explanations about the organization and our policies. I've been creating a standard project layout and template project that demonstrates that layout and the tools and processes like I talked about for Pallets Eco. And I'll be writing about all those tools and processes as well as the various other maintainer knowledge I've accumulated that's knocking around in my head but needs to be out on paper. I want to create maintainer documentation so anyone can pick up that documentation and maintain our projects regardless of if I'm available. So that's my goal over the next 6 months. Now that doesn't say anything about writing code. That just says about writing documentation. So that's what I have to look forward to. I've been making progress. I started thinking about this last PyCon, and I've been slowly building up what I want to get out privately. And I've been making progress, and I still have a ways to go, but I'm feeling good about it. These two cats are both trying to get my attention, so I pet them and not the other one. It's not working. So you too can get involved. So Pallets is a community organization. We do well if we support each other and contribute together. My goal is to see Pallets grow, and you can help with that. Stick around to listen to the talks today, but also come by and introduce yourselves to us anytime during office hours later, or throughout the conference if you see us. It's easier than you think to get involved in some way, not only writing code, but reproducing issues, researching standards, improving documentation, translating, automating, adding coverage, coming up with ideas and discussing things with us. We greatly appreciate all the help that you give us and our community gives us. We'll be having office hours later today. If you want to chat about anything related to Flask and the Pallets projects, as well as sprints starting Monday, which are a great way to learn how to contribute. Outside of PyCon itself, we'd love to have more people participating in Q&A on our Discord server and on each project's GitHub's discussion page. People can ask and answer questions there as well. Thank you.